Hey guys, it's Greg by the Bootstraps, b2bootstraps.com. Today we're going to talk about Avengers Endgame and kind of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole, my thoughts and opinions on some of it, and kind of see how it all ties in together. So obviously I think the majority of everyone's super excited for this weekend. Avengers Endgame comes out. It's the 22nd Marvel movie in the MCU. I'm going to do a spoiler video for it after we see it on Saturday. But I kind of know what's already going to happen just because I've already watched the spoiler reviews and read kind of like the synopsis on it. You know, I'm the kind of person where it's like, I don't care if I know the story going into a movie. I'm more interested on like how they get there. You know, so I could go into like Captain Marvel. I knew what was going to happen in Captain Marvel before I actually saw it. The Black Panther, I knew what was going to happen there. You know, Glass and stuff like that. Like I've seen all these movies where I've read the synopsis before actually seeing the movie itself. My interesting takeaway from it is not so much like the story, although some of that stuff is really interesting. It's seeing how all that comes together at the end of it. Like how do they go from point A to point B, you know, or point C or D, and what are all like the intricacies and like the character development and stuff like that, because obviously when you read a synopsis or if you watch like a spoiler video, you don't see like what's on film. Like you can't see it. And media for me, particularly when it comes to movies, is like one of my favorite pastimes, or at least it used to be. Not so much more in this day and age, particularly with all the people and their activisms and stuff like that. Like I would try really hard to separate the actor from the activist per se, but some of these people have gotten so extreme in their viewpoints for, you know, at least for my liking. You know, and I'm not saying you have to think the same way. At least for my liking, I really can't support them. I won't go down the list of the people, even in this Marvel Cinematic Universe, that I personally can't stand. Chris Evans. You know, I personally, you know, don't like. I want to enjoy these just because of what they are and what's come before them. You know, so I'm actually looking forward to, you know, Endgame. You know, I'm really interested to see how they bring it all together at the end. Again, knowing how the story is going to roll out. You know, so I'm not going to make any predictions like what I think is going to happen because that would be unfair because obviously I kind of already know. Thank you, Momo. You know, you guys, you know, they kind of already know what's going to happen. So again, I'm not going to sit there and try and like say, oh, I think this or I think that. Hey, grody. You know, I'm not going to sit there and, you know, try and say that. However, I did want to bring up something though. I've heard a lot, you know, going into Endgame. The same thing with Infinity Wars. You know, all these people are like, man, the MCU has accomplished something that's never been done. These 22 films that all come together and create this one large narrative and story. And I kind of wanted to like pump the brakes on that real quick. Like my wife and I were talking, we were walking the flea bag over here around, and we were talking about like, you know, they have all these movies and all these characters, you know, and they're dealing with the Infinity Stones and how interesting and cool it was to see all these movies come together at various plot points and various decisions. But then we started actually talking about it, like, you know, there's a lot of stuff that's in the MCU that quite frankly, if you're looking at the Infinity Wars and Infinity Endgame or Avengers Endgame, and then the movies that tie in directly with the Infinity Stones, there's actually quite a few Marvel MCU movies that don't have anything to do with the overall like universe outside of the fact that they exist in the universe. You know, a couple examples are Winter Soldier. You know, it's a great movie. It actually is a really good movie. But that movie could be stripped out, and outside of introducing the Winter Soldier, it really has no tie into Infinity Wars. You know, the Black Panther, Captain Marvel, the Hulk movie, the first Thor movie, you know, Civil War. You know, there's a ton of movies that are in this MCU that actually have no bearing, you know, Ant-Man, for example, you know, that have no bearing in the overall Infinity, you know, Stone, Saga, War, whatever you want to call it. Like, I don't really know. Again, I've said this in one of my other videos that I don't watch, like, I don't read comic books. You know, I don't know anything about the comic books. I really don't care about the comic books, quite frankly. You know, so that when people say like, man, I can't believe they did this in this movie, this is not like the comics, I'm going, I don't really care. Because it doesn't mean anything to me, you know. I look at it as like film, as art, as like the medium that I'm watching it right now. Like I've heard a couple people sit there and say like, hey, I shouldn't have to go to the source material to understand what's going on in the movie. Like it shouldn't be a relevant point to me. And I would agree with that. You know, like the Transformers movies or G.I. Joe movie or any of that other stuff. Anything where there's already something pre-established, like the X-Men movies. or comics. You know, if I watch the X-Men movies, they ought to flow within that medium of which it's being presented to me, where I don't need to go to the source material or outside influences to understand the overall picture. You know, a good example or bad example of this is the Star Wars movies, particularly like the new trilogy of movies that are coming out. You know, there's a lot of tie-in novels and tie-in books and comics that help kind of flesh out the story of these movies that have come out, the two so far that have come out in the new trilogy, and quite frankly, they suck. Like, they're really bad movies. They're just horrible story-driven movies. And they go, oh, but if you read the extended material, it makes so much sense. Yeah, but as a consumer, I should not have to piece together your story because of outside influences. It ought to be presented to me in this medium that makes more sense. It should be more coherent. And I would say that the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for the most part, does a really good job when they tell the tales of the stories that actually affect the Infinity War, Stone Saga, whatever you want to call it. I'm not quite sure what you want to call it. The Thanos shit. There you go. There's the way to call it. The purple chin ball guy. You know, those stories within that are really cool. But, you know, when they talk about, like, oh, these are 21 movies that have came before it. Okay, maybe 20 because you can't really count Infinity Wars. But the 20 movies that came before it, you know, yeah, but there's so many of those stories that are not applicable to the actual Infinity War story. You know, Captain Marvel's a prime example, and so is the Black Panther. Those two movies were like phenomenal. At least the critics say they were phenomenal. But those are two good examples of movies that you didn't even have to have them in the story. Like, you could have introduced the Black Panther in the Civil War movie, which wasn't even necessary for the Infinity Saga. You could have introduced him in Civil War, never even did the Black Panther movie, brought him back for Infinity Wars, and everyone would have been, oh yeah, cool, yeah, that makes sense. You know, we didn't need to see his origin story to have a better understanding. I mean, I'm glad that, well, not really, I personally hated the movie, but I'm glad that people who enjoyed that got to see that, but it doesn't make a damn bit of difference. Same thing with Captain Marvel, you know. They could have introduced Captain Marvel at the end of Infinity Wars, which they did, well, sort of. And then they could have had her in this new movie, and they really didn't have to do a backstory per se, like an entire 2 hour and 30-minute movie. They could have maybe done like a 5-minute, 10-minute clip in this movie to kind of flesh her out as a character, you know. So when they talk about, like, oh, this great, unbelievable cinematic universe, you know, and all these stories come together, well, that's kind of a lie, because there's a lot that goes on in these stories that really don't apply to this. You know, is it a masterful feat? You know, all these 22 movies combined, and then afterwards we'll continue to go? Yeah, sure. You know, it's interesting if you like comic book movies. But would you say it's like never been done? Well, I guess not. I mean, I guess it kind of depends on what you consider what's a great, you know, medium source of material. I would say that the Lord of the Rings movies are far superior when it comes to an overall storytelling. I'd say also even like a visuals, you know, side of things. I mean, everyone likes the CGI, duke it out, the fight scenes and all this other stuff. I mean, those are cool. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of enjoyment to these movies. I'm not dogging them. I'm just saying, like, there are better stories that are already out and have been done previously that I think kind of fit that narrative if you're looking for like a large story that takes place over multiple films, that I would say are actually better, you know. Anyway, those are my two thoughts on the movie, or at least that whole entire cinematic universe. Good to have, enjoyable certainly. A lot of them don't even need to be there. You know, Iron Man 2 and 3, Ant-Man, really, or Ant-Man and the Wasp. You can keep Ant-Man, but kind of get Ant-Man and the Wasp. I mean, there's a lot of those movies that you could take out, and they really don't do anything different between what came before it and then what's here now. But we can at least appreciate the overall Infinity Saga, ball chin dude, purple dickhead, you know, for what it is. So anyway, that's my thoughts. Comment below and let me know. I'll talk to you guys later.